welcome to the VSC Healing Begins Here podcast series. The Victim Service Center, or the VSC, is a nonprofit organization that provides free, individualized counseling and other services to survivors of any kind of trauma in Central Florida. Today, we will be talking about VSC's SANE, or Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner program. In this first segment, we have joining VSC Senior Victim Advocate Jocelyn Reyes to chat about VSC's crisis response services. So welcome and thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show as well again. So Jocelyn, I was wondering if you could just give people just a real brief overview of what you do at the VSC.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I am the Senior Victim Advocate and Crisis Counselor there. My role specifically with the agency focuses more on our acute side and our acute services. And acute is just the term that we use for those individuals who are looking to get a forensic collection done, which in society it's known as a rape kit. And then I also help run our 24/7 helpline.
Got it. And then when you say acute, you mean that it's just recently happened, the sexual assault?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct. Okay. So in the counties that we serve, acute is the first 120 hours from the time a sexual assault occurs.
Understood. Mm-hmm. And you talked a little bit about that helpline, and we'll dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
But is it truly 24 hours? Anyone can call it anytime?
Absolutely. So it's 24/7. We have, the advocates have different shifts, so we make sure that it's being answered at any time during the day. It doesn't matter if it's 12 a.m., 3 a.m., 11 p.m. at night, someone's going to answer that call. And it is for anyone to call. We do know services specifically for Orange County, Osceola, and Seminole, but we've had calls from different counties in Florida, different states, out of country. So we just, won't leave them without any resources. We'll try our best to connect them to their local rape crisis center, or connect them to the best next resource for them wherever they are.
And those victim advocates are all like trauma-informed?
Yes, absolutely. So for the most part, they are all master level advocates. Mm-hmm. We do have some who are currently getting their masters as well, but we are all trained in trauma-informed care.
Got it. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
But, you mentioned the counties that we serve. Mm-hmm. So VSC is the Certified Rape Crisis Center for Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties in Central Florida. And it's actually the only certified rape crisis center in those counties. So with that, we provide that immediate services, that crisis response, and things like that to survivors of trauma. But I wanted to ask you, why is it so important that these rape crisis centers exist?
Just for the need of them. Unfortunately, not many people know how frequent sexual assaults actually happen. Statistically here within the United States, an American gets sexually assaulted every 68 seconds. And in Orange County itself, we always do about around 400 cases a year. So, those needs are definitely something that we have to provide to the community. And then not just the rape kits themselves, but, just having that immediate support that you can reach through the 24/7 helpline. And then our other ongoing services like crisis counseling, support groups, et cetera, those are free of charge. And I think that's amazing because sometimes, individuals don't have the financial means to seek out the support that they need. So just the fact that we can provide that for them free of charge is amazing.
Yeah, I always forget to mention that it's completely free.
Yes.
Completely confidential, of course. And then we'll talk a little bit more about, the reporting process as well. But I think that it's so important that you mentioned that there were almost 400 cases a year. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
Wow.
Last year, 2020 to 2021, we did almost 400 cases. I want to say maybe it was around the 370 mark, but close to 400. And I know the year before that, since I was on, it was past 400.
And I know that we get a lot of crisis calls to the helpline too. And I think last 2021, I think it was about 2,000 calls. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And again, my main focus is to answer the helpline. And I think just every month I'm reporting a little bit over 100 calls.
That is incredible. And I think that that's super important to highlight just how much of a need the Rape Crisis Center is here. So what exactly are those VSC services that are for acute cases of sexual assault?
Mm-hmm. So specifically to the acute side, It all starts with our 24/7 helpline and that emotional support that's needed. Sometimes they're in a state of crisis, so our advocates will run through some mindfulness techniques or some coping skills to be able to ground them. We always assess if they're in a safe space, and we ask, what is it, what options do they need? So we talk about the different options that they have, which comes down to essentially reporting their sexual assault or not reporting their sexual assault, what each one of those look like. If they do want a forensic collection completed, we go ahead and we schedule that, meet their needs, what time works for their schedule, et cetera. And then as well as being able to provide immediate support if needed, if they do want to report to law enforcement, we can do accompaniment services for them. And then just, if they feel like they just want to go the mental health route, we can definitely direct them to our main office to set up an appointment with them so that they can begin counseling, support groups, whatever it is that they may need.
Absolutely. It sounds like there's a lot of different options for healing, and the survivors kind of have that choice, and that advocate's kind of there to help guide them to figure out what that choice is right for them. But today we're talking specifically about like sexual assault nurse examiners and that kind of role. So can you tell a little bit about like the forensic exam? So it has to be done within a few hours or something like that?
Yeah, so the forensic collection, it's done within the first 120 hours from the sexual assault. And I know that equals out to 5 days, but it's important that we pinpoint it to the time, just because if it's after, that certain time, let's say it's 10 a.m. on the 5th day, unfortunately, we won't be able to do a forensic collection. So we just always inform them exactly what they need to do. If they do want to get a forensic collection done, they need to see us before this day and this time. But with that process, again, determining if they want to report or not, it looks differently on how that process is started. But once they get to our facility, the advocate and the sexual assault nurse examiner work together to do the forensic collection portion. The advocate will prepare them by going over paperwork, letting them know what that process looks like. And then our sexual assault nurse examiner takes over, and they obviously conduct the collection portion itself. The survivor has the right to have the advocate in the room if they would like, just for emotional support as well, because unfortunately it can be a very invasive process.
Absolutely. And I know that I want to highlight as well, this is for anyone in the community, any gender, correct?
Absolutely, any gender, and we do serve those that are 12 and over. So those younger than 12, we will, direct them to the appropriate place where they need to get the forensic collection completed.
Got it. And you also mentioned, are these services are completely free, of course?
Yes.
But are they available to survivors whether or not they want to report?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, that first step is reaching out to the helpline. And if they want to report to law enforcement, we talk them through that process. It would be contacting the local law enforcement agency where the assault took place. Once law enforcement is involved, they will, conduct their interview questions, and then they contact the helpline to let us know that they are en route to our facility for the collection to take place. If they don't want to report to law enforcement, I will say that as long as they are not a minor, so 18 and over, they have the right to get a collection done without having law enforcement involved. Just because the most important part is to collect any potential evidence in case, they want to report later on next year. Whenever they are ready to report, if they want to, at least we have the evidence collected so that they can utilize it once they do report. But those who are minors, just due to mandated reporting, unfortunately, we always have to get law enforcement involved.
Absolutely. And we just have a few more seconds together here. But I just wanted to ask finally, why is it important that we are trauma-informed care, right, when we, approach this?
So it's definitely important because trauma-informed care is an approach that mostly social service individuals are aware of. I am glad to see that it's getting, more recognized by first responders in general and just other individuals. But individuals who have experienced trauma, they will, think, act, speak differently, and by differently, I mean what society deems as different, not normal. So if we are not aware of that already, we may not be able to, recognize what's going on and be able to provide them the services that they actually need.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn, for being here today and talking a little bit about the support services that we give to survivors of sexual violence.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And when we come back, we will be joined by Nancy Moskiak, which is VSE's SANE coordinator, to chat about the team of nurses that conduct the forensic exams, so don't go away. Welcome back to the VSC Healing Begins Here podcast series. In this next segment, we are joined by VSC SANE coordinator Nancy Moskiak to chat about the Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner program at the VSC. So Nancy, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Emily. I love to talk about sexual assault nurse examiners.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here today. So with that, love to start off, if you could tell us a little bit about what you do at the VSC.
I'm the coordinator. I look at myself as liaison between the VSC and the nurses and also the other SART partners that, law enforcement, district attorney's office, the lab, set up tours and educational opportunities for the nurses.
Absolutely. So you said SART. So what exactly is SART?
It's all the people that come together to help the sexual assault patient when she's first introduced into the system.
Sure.
It includes the first responders, emergency room personnel, the police, district attorney's office, the lab. They all play a part in what we do.
Yeah, so you're coordinating a lot of different people, including the nurses. So what exactly is a SANE, or a sexual assault nurse examiner?
A sexual assault nurse examiner is a registered nurse who has advanced training in sexual assault patients and how to care for them. So there are courses that are 40 hours long, and then they come back to us and we do another 40 hours where they demonstrate and they observe other cases until they feel comfortable, and they have other projects to sign off. They have an orientation list, and when they're all signed off, they can request time on the schedule. They're hired independently by the VSC, so they're contractors.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it. And you mentioned that they get specific training. So they do specific training just to do a sexual assault exam.
Yes, they already have the knowledge of being an RN and how to take care of the patient, but what they learn in the 40-hour course is how to problem solve and how to help the patient get through the medical forensic exam.
Right.
So it takes a little time to learn what the lab needs, what the police, and we're not directed by anybody. We're independent, so we do what we feel is right for the patient.
That makes a lot of sense. And I wanted to ask you, what exactly is like the history of SANEs?
Well, it was funny. The emergency room nurses first came up with the idea that these people were not appropriate for the ER, and not in a mean way. They were saying they needed to be a priority, and they weren't a priority. So they just wouldn't let it go. And in the 80s, we had Virginia Lynch come along, and she wrote the first curriculum for the forensic nurse program. And from there, 72 nurses got together and they formed the International Association of Forensic Nurses, which is our governing body today. We have a state agency, the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence, also.
And you mentioned that that this process needs to be kind of specialized, it sounds like. That, and that's why kind of the SANE nurses exist. And we talked about earlier this concept of trauma-informed care. So what exactly is trauma-informed care, and how does it relate to, when we work with survivors of sexual violence as SANE nurses?
Okay, a couple things you need to know. What we do is not a medical necessity. It's based all on consent. So we meet the patient where they are. We provide for privacy, respect, and a calm, quiet place. We let them make choices.
Yeah.
We put them in charge of the exam. We tell them that even though they sign consent, if we get to that part of the exam and they don't want to do it, we'll just write declines.
Right.
And that kind of starts to give their power back and gets them onto the road of recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because we know as sexual assault, it's a crime of power and control, and giving that power back to a survivor through this process, through consent, and also you can do some of the exam, you don't have to do all of it. It's given and
Right.
Yeah.
Instead
totally.
of being in an environment where the lights are bright and it's noisy and chaotic, they're in a comfortable place and they have time. And if they need time, we give them that extra time.
Absolutely. And you brought up a really good point that I wanted to kind of touch on just real quick. Where exactly is this done for VSC's in Orange County?
Osceola County, we have 2 treatment sites, and we have a team of 10 nurses that are on 24/7 call. So we meet that patient within the hour. And that's an important point. They are tired, they're exhausted. They need advice right now. They need somebody that can provide that for them. So it's a wonderful program for them. And that's what the nurses are dedicated to doing.
And they're within the hour, 24 hours, and within the hour they'll be there.
Yeah, 10 nurses sound like a lot, except when you do the schedule, because they are independent contractors, so they request time on the schedule. So we always look for burnout in our nurses, and we always tell them if you need a break, you take a break. So they may request less on one month and more on the other, but the nurses come together and they cover all the shifts, which is really great for me.
Absolutely. I know that the SANE nurses really work closely together and support each other throughout this as well.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. And you mentioned that, that the ER might not be the best place. So where are these forensic exams done in Orange and Osceola County?
They're at an undisclosed location because we do have patients that are victims of domestic abuse. So we don't like to advertise that address, but the police are aware, and sometimes our advocate meets them at a different place and brings them to the center.
Okay, but then sometimes they have to do it in the hospital setting?
Yes, but still, the ER nurses still advocate for those patients. It's amazing. They always provide a nice, quiet room for us. If a patient's going to be admitted, we may have to do the exam there. So it's a different situation. They get them out of the waiting room as quickly as they can. They give them advice. If they're stable, they send them on their way. And that's one of the things we always look for, whether the patient is stable.
So Nancy, I know that you have over 12 years of experience in this field. So how have you seen it change or improvements made in DNA evidence collection?
Well, DNA collection, they can now get touch DNA, which means if somebody just touches the body where they should have touched the body, I can maybe get touch DNA, and I can ask them to rule that out when I send the swab. So the technology, if you look at your cell phone and how far it's come, that's how far the equipment that they use has come. We do tours all the time, and it's fantastic what they can do.
Yeah, that's amazing, just hearing how things have changed throughout the years.
This is true.
Just when you were here.
Right.
But also, I wanted to ask you specifically, Nancy, how is this particular work rewarding for you? Why do you do what you do?
Well, I go to conferences and I listen to survivors, and they always mention those things, and it's so rewarding to know that, we're there when they need us. It's a different model than 20 years ago, and it really helps patients start that recovery process. And I'm so proud of them when I see them able to help other people by speaking out. And that's the information I'd like to get other people to know.
Sure. Yeah, how you empower the survivor, then the survivor then.
And they go out.
Yeah.
And, I know one survivor said it was the best decision she ever made when she listened to her detective, and he took her to a SANE.
Wow.
Because they were able to get the evidence she needed.
That's incredible.
So,
and I know that we just
very
have...
rewarding.
Absolutely. And I know that we only have a few different seconds left together, but I wanted to ask you, you're actually retired as well, and you still do this. So that rewarding piece is very evident. Is there anything that you'd like to say to the survivors out there before we kind of sign off?
Well, they're my heroes. They're the reason I get up in the morning and do what I do, because the ER nurses that thought about this, and it was just an idea, and they made it come to all the way to where we are today. And they've helped the survivors so much, and And because of them, I keep doing it.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And when we come back, we will be joined by one of VSC's SANEs, Kay Barrington, to talk about the process of getting a forensic exam done. So stay tuned. You did. For our final segment of the VSC Healing Begins Here podcast series. Today we are chatting about the immediate crisis services the VSC provides to the community, among those being the DNA evidence collection process for survivors of sexual violence. To talk specifically on what that process looks like, we have Kay Barrington, one of our VSC's own SANE nurses. So Kay, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. It's so good to be here, Emily.
I'm very excited to have you. I wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of that process. So what is the process of DNA evidence collection? What is it like, the rape kit?
Well, the rape kit, as we refer to it as, it's a packet, a physical packet that we get made up from FDLE, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And in the kit itself, it's basically packets of swabs, forms that we complete out, and then once the evidence is collected with the swabs, the packets, we seal them with the evidence and the documentation on the form. That's sealed, and then that is pretty much the rape kit.
Okay, got it. And then as a SANE nurse, what are some things that you kind of have to consider when you're working with your patients or survivors?
Very important question. A lot of things we have to consider because, again, they're coming to the center, coming to us. They're pretty much fearful of what to expect. Sure. They've already spoken to several people. They've spoken to the law enforcement. They have spoken to the advocate, and now they come to speak to the nurse. So you've already told your story a number of times. Sure. And then by the time you get to me, the nurse, I have to, again, take you back through the process and explain my role, what I'm to do, and what your experience would be in that exam room.
Right, and so kind of having that important environment, right, that's safe for the survivor. How do you make sure that you kind of make them feel like heard and safe and things like that as a SANE nurse? Again,
we're going to do the trauma-informed approach. We're going to accept that patient just the way they come in. We're going to be non-judgmental. It's going to be non-threatening for them, and we don't want to re-traumatize them. So when they come in, depending on if it's a child, as you know, we see adolescents 12 on up. Depending on that person's growth and development, we want them to feel relaxed, calm. So we pretty much assure them, establish a rapport immediately, letting them know that that exam room is there, we're there to help them, and anything that they don't feel comfortable with at all, that we would not do it. So all along the process, the examination, I'm explaining to them what I want them to do, what I want to do, what I'm offering them, and then they say yes or no. I get the consent before I move forward. With establishing that rapport, it somewhat calms them down when they know what to expect from that examination.
Yeah, absolutely. And during the exam as well, so obviously you're there and the survivor, is the advocate also there?
Again, that depends. The advocate initially speaks to the victim, the patient, the survivor. The advocate meets with them, explains their services, and then they bring them over and introduce them to me, the nurse. I then ask them, again, with consent, privacy, I ask them if they feel comfortable with the advocate coming in at a later point of the exam. For support, and then they tell me yes or no. At that point of the exam, I ask them again if they want the advocate to come in. If they want the advocate to come in, the advocate comes in and assists, talks with the patient while the examination is going on.
Got it. And I know that the exam is obviously the main thing as far as the service that you provide at the sexual assault treatment centers. But we also provide like medical intervention, right? So can you tell me a little bit about those other services that we provide to survivors?
Sure. The other services, again, when they're sitting in front of me and I explain what they're doing, what they're going to experience in that exam, I let them know after the consent that they are to, that we will be offering treatments for STD, sexually transmitted illnesses. So we offer, I tell them what the medications are, what the side effects are. I tell them that we also test their urine for pregnancy. I let them know that I'll be getting a specimen, and at that time, if they agree to do those things, then we move forward with the medication regime that we have, as well as, testing for the pregnancy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also are able to provide Plan B and prophylaxis, right?
Yes. The Plan B is that one-time emergency contraceptive medication that, due to different beliefs, there's some that reject that and do not want to disturb that, and there are others, because of the unwanted pregnancy, they will definitely take it without any hesitation. But again, it's offered to anyone, if there has been some type of penetration, we will definitely offer that.
Absolutely, and it's all completely free for those survivors. How long can a forensic exam actually take?
The exam can take, again, it depends on the amount of injuries, the amount of trauma, the time that it takes to do the exam. But I would say on an average, a forensic medical exam from 2 to 4 hours to get your medical forensic exam done, your documentation done, the labeling and packaging of your forensic evidence, and all that's completed within the 4-hour period.
And does this process ever happen in a hospital setting?
It does, Emily. We do get calls when the police officers are called to the emergency room. The nurses at that point, once the patient states that they have been sexually violated or raped, policemen are called. And there's some instances that they cannot bring the patient to us.
Okay.
If the patient is going to be there longer than the 120 hours, 5 days, then at that point, we make a decision to go, if the patient is stable enough, if they give us consent, we'll go and do the medical forensic at the hospital setting.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, if they're going to be discharged in and out, then the police officer will bring them to our center.
Understood. And just a few final questions here. How do you ensure that all survivors, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender identity, feel safe and supported during this process?
Again, I can't stress enough the trauma-informed care approach. We have to be very empathetic with our listening. We have to convey that they've done nothing wrong. It's no fault of theirs. So we encourage them and tell them how courageous they are to even come into the center and tell of that type of experience, because you can't just say some of the things that they have to say to us to anyone. So by encouraging them, trying to demonstrate a non-judgmental attitude, but just to give us that experience, I think it helps them to feel comfortable enough that maybe I am in the right place. They are going to help me toward my healing process, and also assist me with the justice, because I'm looking for justice as well.
Absolutely. And just as a final question here, Kay, I wanted to ask you, how is this kind of rewarding for you? Why do you do what you do?
Oh, that's great. I do what I do because when it comes to being violated, it's almost like a hidden type of secret sometimes that you really don't want to discuss. But I would say to survivors, people that have that secret or know someone that have been sexually assaulted. When I say that, sometimes you don't know, I mean raped or been touched without your permission, that they need to know that what happened to them mattered, and that they're professionally people that are there ready, willing, and able to support them with their healing process.
Oh, no, thank you so much, Kay. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate you being here today and talking about all the amazing work that you do at the VSC.
Thank you, Emily. I appreciate it.
And if you would like to learn more about the VSC and our free services, please visit victimservicecenter.org, call our office line at 407-254-9415, or call our crisis line at 407-500-HEAL. And to everyone listening, healing is not linear, and you are not alone.